see you're ahead of me.
Is there a lot on this that wasn't included?
No, do the
Call the meeting to order. Town of Woodfin Town Council, this being Tuesday, August the 15th, 2023. First item is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next item is consent agenda. Shannon?
Thank you, Mayor. So we have a pretty robust consent agenda this month, so I'm just going to quickly summarize them. First, regular and closed session meeting minutes from July 18th. We have a budget amendment rolling over certain pending expenditures from 2023, fiscal year 2023, into this current new fiscal year 2024. There's a change order for our paving contract with French Broad Paving. This is the company that did our 20 street paving project last year. One of those streets did not get completed. It's being carried over into this year, so we did a change order for that. And then since we were having to do that anyway, we went ahead and added 4 more streets to get a little bit more work done. Items 4, 5, and 6 are at the request of Buncombe County. It's part of some steps they want us to take to clarify tax collection and being the authority to do the tax collection. Item number 7 is reappointment of Chris Budenik to our Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee. Chris has been a great addition to that committee, and so his reappointment is well supported. And then contract approval for the new Public Works salt shed is also included in this. This is something we've been talking about for a while now. We finally got our preferred contract, and so ready to move forward on that as well. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if we need more discussion, we can pull these items off consent.
I've got a question about number 6, tax collector. Is that something that's going to be done in-house, or are you going to have to hire somebody?
Well, Buncombe County continues to do it. They just want us to authorize them
To do it.
more
Oh,
specifically
okay.
to do it. And I think Sherry becomes our tax collector working with Buncombe.
Okay.
But by statute, you do have to appoint and charge your tax collector with
I got
the
you.
duty to go collect it, but then you can delegate the actual act of collection to the county if they'll
Cool.
accept it. So-
I mean, they've got a 99.7% record. I don't think we could beat that.
Right. In practice, nothing will change. It's just
Right.
kind of putting the proper documentation to the authority.
Okay, any further questions for Shannon? All right, moving on to public comment. We have one person.
You need to approve the consent.
Oh,
Motion to approve.
Jim, yeah, getting ahead of myself. Okay, you've heard the items on the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now moving on to public comment. We have one person signed up who wishes to speak, Justin Young. Come up and state your name again for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Justin Young, I'm going to make a public comment. I'll be speaking in just a moment about Riverlink and our education programs, but I wanted to take a moment to express Riverlink's support for the reduction in the plastic, single-use plastics. Our mission is to promote the environmental and economic vitality of our French Broad River here. And in all of the work that we do, we see a huge impact from these materials on the river, degrading into storm drains and creating blockages that leads to flooding. And so we think it's a really great thing for the town of Woodfin to pursue reducing these single-use plastics. And I don't know what's next, but I think my presentation might be next. Okay. Like I said, I'm here to talk about our education programs at Riverlink
Okay,
in 2020.
excuse me, before you start your presentation, I need to ask if anybody else has any comments.
Public comment.
Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to presentation and reports. And Riverlink happens to be first, so go ahead.
Thank you so much. So yeah, here to talk about our education programs. In 2023, Town of Woodfin awarded us $2,500 to bring our programs into Woodfin Elementary specifically. So I'm here tonight to just kind of give an overview of what these programs do, what we're trying to accomplish with them. When it comes to our education programs, we really break it down into three major realms. We've got our River Rats program, which is the main thing we do in school and now out of school as well. During the summer, we host 5 weeks of our summer camp to get kids out exploring the watershed. And in the spring, we do a art and poetry contest called Voices of the River, encouraging kids to use nature and the river as inspiration for many creative endeavors. So River Rats is the main thing that we're going to be bringing into Woodfin Elementary. This program is offered free of charge to all schools throughout the French Broad River watershed, which is the 8 counties in North Carolina. We focus on 3rd through 8th grade, but we do offer our programming to K through 12, depending on teacher needs, depending on what sort of curriculum support they may need. Our programs, everything that we do is aligned with the North Carolina Essential Standards, specifically for science. We're currently working on revising that since those were just updated recently. So that's a fun little experiment for us. And for all of the things that we do, we really want to make sure that we're reducing the barriers to entry as much as possible. And so we provide all of the tools and equipment for students to engage with their water resources. So this may be Crocs, it may be transportation for smaller groups. We do have a 15-passenger van that we can use to transport them to beautiful stream sites. And our top priority at the moment with all of these programs is to connect with the underserved schools and community groups in our area. Woodfin Elementary is definitely a really great community that we want to be in touch with, that we've not worked with previously, and so this is a really great opportunity that we're very grateful for you all to support. When it comes to what we actually do in our River Rats program, we have multiple things that we can bring into the classroom. One of the most popular is this that you see pictured here. This is our stream table that talks about erosion and flooding specifically, which we've seen in our communities to be a really huge issue. After every rain, you know, the river looks terrible. We have huge impacts from flooding, and so it's great to be able to show kids on a small scale what this looks like and have them kind of experiment with how we could construct our communities a little bit better. We also talk about stormwater management with them. We have some cool models that we can bring in for that. We touch on the water cycle, and we have lots of other, miscellaneous games that we can bring into the classroom. Sometimes we'll bring in microscopes and look at preserved specimens from the river as well. But the highlight is definitely getting out into the field with the kids, getting them into a stream to kind of explore and figure out what makes these environments tick and what sort of enjoyment and appreciation they can take home with them. So this may look like macroinvertebrate sampling, which these are small bugs. They live in the stream. They tell us about the health of the river. And so we can go out and look for those and make assumptions and hypotheses about that. We test the water chemistry with them as well, talking about lots of different factors like DO, or dissolved oxygen, pH, nitrates, phosphates, and what sort of things upstream may be impacting those qualities. And we're always looking to develop more lessons. Right now we're working pretty heavily on developing one focused on plants, and we're also working on one focused on history and culture around the river, which will allow us to connect with not just science teachers, but hopefully history teachers as well. So when it comes to working with Woodfin Elementary, we typically do 2 days of programming max with schools because we have a huge demand for this program. Last year we worked with 4,300 students at 42 different schools. And so thanks to funding from people like Town of Woodfin, we are able to dive a little deeper with some of these target schools that we really want to work with. And so with Woodfin Elementary, we're able to do an entire week of programming with them thanks to these funds. And we even have some funds to help cover some transportation stipends to get them to and from stream locations. So we're really excited to connect with them and make this great work happen and hopefully provide a good resource for the kids. A new recent expansion to our River Rats program is the out-of-school element. We recently hired a new educator who is going to be running our programs within after-school and during summer school programming as well. We're hoping to work with established community partners who are already running great after-school programs. We've been able to connect with people like Open Doors, Big Brothers Big Sisters, YMCA, and others, and really work to just support what they're already doing and provide some outdoor enrichment. And so this is, a key element of our programming because we find that after school does normally serve some of the more marginalized populations in our community. Within these programs, we're hoping to do more in-depth experiences. So when we go into the schools, like I said, it's normally a maximum of 2 days of programming. But with these kids, we're hoping to do things like 8 weeks of programming the same day of the week each week. And then because it is smaller groups, we can provide transportation and again, reduce those barriers. So all of our in-school and out-of-school stuff, that is the primary focus for sure. But there's lots of fun to be had on the river as well, and our camp is totally focused on that stuff. It's also used as a way to support the things that we do during the school year. Since it is all offered for free, our camp can generate some good revenue to help support those things. And we've seen great feedback from it. This past year it sold out in 4 days, so we're thrilled at the response from the community for this sort of experience. And then finally, our Voices of the River contest, and this is a great one if anybody has children, nieces, nephews, their own kids who really like to express themselves through art or writing. We encourage them to send in their submissions based on inspiration from nature. Every year we have a different theme, and we get prizes donated from local businesses, whether that's the HOP, Eno, Asheville Museum of Science. The Arboretum has given passes before, and so it's a great way for them to get some prizes that encourage them to get outside even more. And we've got some great submissions that we've had over the past 3 years. These are just some of our favorites, but there are plenty more. And then we do a culminating gallery event at the end of this, typically around May. So I'll keep it short and sweet, and yeah, open it for questions.
I have 2 questions. How much was our grant?
$2,500.
Did it help?
Yes, it is a big help. Through transportation stipend alone, that's a really nice thing. And then our program is really people-powered. We need educators to go out there and be with the kids and facilitate and know how to manage behavior. And so being able to, go to the bottom line to pay some salaries was really nice.
Question 2, how do I sign up for this River Rat program? That sounds fun.
Well, we will be developing a volunteer educator program within the next year. So if anyone is curious about coming to join us on the lessons, there will be an opportunity soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you doing all grades at Woodfin Elementary or 3rd and 4th?
We're probably going to do 3rd, maybe 5th. It depends on which teachers have the most need and feel like they can fit it into their curriculum and schedule.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other question?
I do want to flag an issue for you. My firm represents the school system and lots of school systems, so I've had this come up lots of times where our clients ask us, can we use a 15-passenger van to take students around? And under the federal regulations, that if you use a van like that to transport students, it's a bus. And it doesn't have all of the rollover and all that stuff, so it's a big potential liability.
Gotcha. Yeah, we so far we have not used it with schools at all. Normally the groups are too big anyways, and so it's been mostly for our camps and the after school. But that's very good to keep in mind. Thank you.
And I'm sure that there'd be some way to arrange for, they have buses that they can,
Yeah.
activity buses they can make available to you.
And I think, when we're looking at the transportation stipend kind of thing, that's what we really want. That way parents aren't having to put in any money towards the field trips.
I'm sure the school system will facilitate this.
Yeah.
Wouldn't really help on that.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, I appreciate your time.
Is that auto?
Otto?
But
Auto.
one of the artworks had
Yeah, Otto the otter right here. Yeah, it can be. Sometimes we
If
call
you
our
want it to
otters
be.
Harry,
Looks like an auto.
Harry Otter. But yeah, the kids have always come up with great names for our mascots.
That's great.
Good job, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is a Stormwater Administrators Program update. Bob Dennis.
And as Bob works his way up, I just wanted to introduce Bob, as I think a lot of you may not have had the opportunity to talk with Bob before, but he's our stormwater administrator, a little over a year,
Almost a year.
almost a year.
September.
Closing in on a year,
Yeah.
so, and now we've got our program really rolling, so we thought now would be a good time for Bob to have the floor.
Thank you. Oh.
Well, again, I'm Bob Dennis. I'm Stormwater Administrator, and she's helping out with some distribution of some education materials. So I'm going to do a couple things here. A tough act to follow with RiverLink there, but we have a stormwater permit, as you may know, as I'm sure you know, MS4 permit. We're required to have that. And there are 6 components to that, or they're called minimum measures, that we're working on. Public education and outreach. This is a small piece of that. These were provided recently to us by Land of Sky Regional Council, with whom we partner on some stormwater things. If you notice on the right side, there's a QR code on that magnet. That's here's some more. Here's the flyer. One page of that I've included. Just good information about illicit connections, dumping, stormwater pollution potentials. And again, the QR code on the bottom right. The point of that is if you had a smartphone and you pointed it at it, that would take you eventually to our stormwater webpage. This is just a snapshot of just the opening screen there. It includes some content for how one applies for permits for the town for stormwater, has some education materials, contact information, so on and so forth. Public involvement and participation, which is actually one of the more enjoyable parts of stormwater work. One of the more challenging parts. Looking forward to involving some residents, younger and older. I'd like to start out with a stormwater stenciling program. As you may or may not be aware, it's a way to go out and label storm drains for the public, to maybe remind some who don't understand that when the water going down the storm drain is not cleaned, it goes straight to the rivers and the streams in this area. So that's something I'm hoping to work on, start this fall. Illicit discharge and detection, which is another way of saying stormwater pollution, oftentimes from piped water. Could be as simple as a leaking septic system, but could also be water that's coming or some other material that's not just water that's going into our streams. And that's a continuing project is identifying those and eliminating them, both through residents letting us know about issues that we may have, and our conducting an inventory on a regular basis over a 5-year period. Construction site runoff refers to erosion control from construction projects. The county has and continues to administer a permitting program for construction runoff. But I'm in contact with the county on those issues. They keep me aware of what's going on with that, even though we're not administering that program. This is just an example of one of the projects. This is a pretty impressive one right here, but some of the materials that are used to limit erosion from a site. Post-construction runoff is something that we are involved in now, thanks to the stormwater ordinance. Once a construction project is complete, the stormwater still needs to be managed. And that has historically been handled by the county. It is now handled, there are a number of permit applications in the works that they are still working through, but new applications can come to the town and be processed by the town. Good, with that. And see if anybody, well, I guess you'll probably recognize this one. This is a good example of some post-construction work, a very nice wetland there at Silverline Park. And this is a very good way to manage the stormwater as it's come on the property. Pollution prevention and good housekeeping. This is actually more what I'm going to talk about the rest of my talk tonight. And it's going to deal more with our stormwater infrastructure and maintaining it. So on the left, this is a photo looking down into a concrete catch basin. And as you can see, there's a lot of material in that. It's not really supposed to be there. It needs to be maintained. On the right is another photo of a catch basin. The water should not be pooled like that. That one apparently has a bigger issue and needs to be attended to. The middle one, I don't know if you can tell. In the center, there's a little horizontal line. That's actually the top of a storm drain culvert pipe that is buried. We don't know exactly where we are with that one. It needs to be dug out and assessed. Which leads to what one of the projects, as you know, is that the town recently received a report from Anchor QEA, who did an assessment of our stormwater infrastructure, and then produced a GIS geodatabase, an ArcGIS database with some of the findings, their findings of the infrastructure. You see on the right, there's a legend showing all the features, items that they looked at. This is an overview of the entire town area, as you can tell. We'll zoom in here a little bit to make it more meaningful. This is Reynolds Mountain Boulevard running east to west there. And you can pick out a few more of the components of the stormwater infrastructure. And then if you zoom in even more closely, the thin blue line on the top side of the road is actually a layer showing where the stream flow is. The more straight bluish green line underneath along the road is actually the stormwater pipe that drains water from our road back to that stream. So there are some symbols there showing where there are inlets. The water is piped along the road, and then eventually it's put back across the road on the other side into that stream. And where I'm going with this is, I'm going to go to the next one here. I just enjoy this one because it's the north end of Riverside Park. Left side is the French Broad River. That's Riverwalk Drive meeting Riverside Drive, and there's just a small section of infrastructure. There's a culvert and a pipe, and then it crosses underneath the road. Crosses underneath the road and then eventually empties into that small stream before it goes into the French Broad. Now, if we were to click on one of those pieces of infrastructure, it would bring up a pop-up box. This is the tool that Anchor created for us, and there's a pop-up box or window that provides a little more information about that particular asset, that inlet. Gives us a number and if we were on the app, we could actually zoom in a bit more and learn a little more about it. And it would provide us an interactive table, shows us all the technical details about it, the diameters, how deep it is, whether or not it has any blockages. And then there's actually, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, included in that table, there's a link to an image that was shot on site, and that's actually what the culvert looks like. So we have a fairly good amount of information about our system based on what Anchor has done for us so far. What they've done is divide this. They've graded our infrastructure into 5 levels, 1 through 5, 5 being the most significant defect grade. And it's roughly 30 assets of our infrastructure that are category 5. 4 being the next with roughly double that amount. And those are the 2 levels that we're going to be concerning ourselves with immediately. And this is a breakdown of what they found. Point being that more than 3/4 of our stormwater assets are passable, would maybe be a good term. So I've thrown up here some examples just to give you a better idea, just so you can kind of see what's going on. I'm not going to dwell on them. This is just for us to work with. So left is the satellite image, right is an actual photo, and then some of the information from their table. As you can see, condition assessment level 4. Got some accumulation of leaves and trash there, clearly. And I'm going to go through these. Like I said, I'm not going to dwell on each one. Here's a little different one, and I don't know if you can see, but the bottom of that pipe is actually rusted through, so that's an issue. Similar situation. This is not uncommon to see. A lot of our stormwater pipes are, this one's actually pretty badly rusted. It's also bent, which can affect the flow rate. Obvious problem here. Can't get much water through that. And here are some examples of the level 5. I'll let you decide. I have a little problem deciding which is 4 and which is 5. They're very similar. Again, this pipe is both, it's damaged and pretty badly obscured. It's there somewhere. This is one of the worst ones. This one actually has quite a bit of scouring around the pipe, so there's some significant erosion going on there too. So where we go from here? We're going to go through their data, Anchor's data, and before we go out in the field and do our best to prioritize based on what we're seeing there, and trying to divide it into 2 categories. That infrastructure that just requires maintenance or some sort of significant cleaning, and then that which may require replacement. Once we've sorted that, we'll go and I'll go out with, Public Works, and we'll do a closer check and verify some of that, because although the information is really good, we aren't really going to have a full picture until some of these that are really badly buried, we aren't going to know the whole story until we look more closely at them. And then we're going to develop a 3-year plan to address these, focusing first on maintenance and then replacement.
But what happens when, quite a bit of this pipe in here in Woodfin's on private property? What happens then?
Well, they've been focusing on that's on town-owned property.
Right.
And there's going to be some that's bordering that private property boundary, and we'll just have to address that one at a time.
you know, down, and the only reason I say that, down by the liquor store, north of the liquor store where that sinkhole's there.
Yes.
That the garbage truck fell in. That's private property, but it runs across state property
Right.
and then into private property again.
Right.
All that's eat out. It's just a matter of time before Weeville Highway caves in.
True.
And,
The town wouldn't be
I'm sorry.
responsible for state land or private property, so we wouldn't be responsible for that.
Right,
So these
but-
are all culverts and assets that are on town-owned.
but it causes flooding. And that's where the problem is. The culvert down there is gone. And when we get a heavy rain, it's got nowhere to get into the stream that runs to the river. It puddles up on Weevil Highway. Well, the DOT will come and dig the ditch out, make a Band-Aid of it, and that's all that's being done. The private property's sitting there with a big hole in the, and Mike, what can we do?
We're looking into it. That's about all I can tell you right now. That is,
We have
I have
several
been looking
properties
at that. It
like
does
that
concern
here
me.
in town.
In those situations, the town really doesn't have any authority.
Right.
There's really not much we can do, except educate them.
Right, right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't know how we're gonna fix these problems. We got one on Union Street the same way.
We can also pay, we can unilaterally pay to fix it. So when there's a health condition or safety condition, we have the authority to abate it. But if you've got a piece of private property that's consumed entirely by a sinkhole, there's not an opportunity to fix it and then sell that property afterwards. It's you're starting with zero and investing all of the
What that would
assets.
cost to fix, I don't think the property'd be worth,
That's usually the problem, so.
but,
Yeah, that's a really visible location, which is.
see, that cost the town a lot of money when that garbage truck fell in there. We had to get a record, get it out, damage the truck. I mean, the town need that. And it's just gonna continue. Now DOT will come and fix their 20-foot. That's not gonna solve the problem, but anyway.
Like I say, I don't have an answer for you on that one. It's a bad spot. It's a bad
Oh, yeah.
situation.
And unfortunately, we have a lot of them. And like the drains, a lot of bigger cities have trucks and manpower dedicated, City of Asheville don't, to clean out the storm drains. It's unbelievable. If you stop at a red light and look at the storm drain, it's stopped completely up with cigarette butts, coffee cups, and dirt, gravel.
Well, and I didn't really get into it in this presentation, but once we get a handle on some of these things that are, broken, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
We're also going to be looking at how do we maintain these, down the road, so we don't have more problems created. We kind of try to focus on the areas that we find are particularly challenging, and maybe
Yeah.
try to do more maintenance on those. Any other questions?
Were you at the end of your presentation? I didn't want to
Yes,
jump. Okay.
yes, yeah.
The one that I had was we've obviously just stood this program up this year, and this is all new for the town. We've got our initial budget, and we've put in there an allocation of $200,000 for capital expenses. Do you have any sense, based on what you've seen with the anchor report so far, of how close we are to the right level of funding for the needs that we have?
I wish I did, but no, we're not, I'm not that far, we're not that far into it yet.
Okay. When you do have a sense of that, could you make sure that's communicated to us? Because we have the ability to tinker with that fee, and if we need to, it'd be better to know sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. I'd even be willing to come back and
Okay.
give a presentation on what has been found, if you'd like that.
That'd be great.
You'll bring
Thank
us
you.
shovels at the same time so
Sure.
we can help.
Absolutely.
This is a big topic. I'd appreciate it if you get invited back periodically to update us. I'd like to know more. This is very
Happy
good.
to.
Thank you.
Sure. Pretty dry compared to my other, my predecessors here, as it were. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Bob.
Thank you.
Okay, Shannon, town manager report.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. I think we've got another presentation or two still this evening. So we've had 3 contracts come in the last month since I reported to council 30 days ago. The first is a very small contract. It's really an annual contract with Land of Sky Regional Council for some GIS support. It's actually an hourly contract, not to exceed $2,000. So Land of Sky provides a number of support services to the town, and this is just one of those. We hope to be able to do more of our own GIS work in the coming years, but for now it's great to have their support when we need it. The second contract is with Simcon. That is the contractor for the salt shed that you approved as part of the consent agenda. So hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a new salt shed. And then the third contract is the French Broad paving contract change order. That also was approved as part of your consent agenda, so for those amounts.
Shannon,
Yes.
can Simcom do that before the winter hits? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they're going to, the plan is to, I think, start construction the end of this month, first of next month, and it's about a 90-day build.
Great.
So it's a fairly simple structure, as you can imagine. It's really, it's 3 walls and a roof, and it supports or covers the salt to keep it dry in bad weather. So it does have to be an engineered structure, though, because of the load against the walls if you're scooping, so. So it's despite it being a simple structure, it's not an inexpensive structure. Moving on to some departmental updates for the administration department. Town Hall Town Center redevelopment plan is sort of our main focus right now. Earlier this month, the steering committee had their 3rd meeting. And in this meeting, we reviewed the draft program, which is essentially the summary of our space needs. So the consultants came in last month and they interviewed staff, key staff, as well as some council members about what our optimal space needs are, not just right now, but projecting into the future based on population growth and the growth of our staff over time. And so it's X amount of square footage for offices, X amount of square footage for storage, X amount of square footage for conference rooms, or how many conference rooms, or how many interview rooms. So they do all of that, and they start to figure out how much square footage we need to plan for a new town hall. We also reviewed what they called a spectrum of options. It was essentially 5 very rough concept plans, kind of space planning plans that sort of show approximate site location for buildings or green space or pedestrian connectivity, vehicular connectivity, parking areas, such things of that nature, and asked the steering committee members to weigh in on what they liked and didn't like about the different options. They're going to take that, and at the next steering committee meeting, as I understand it, they're going to do further refinement and take those 5 concepts down to 3. And I think that's what they're referring to as the design prototyping. September 19th will be the 5th meeting, and that's further design. They call it design reconciliation. I think it's design refinement. But they're also going to do a presentation to town council. So in September at your council meeting, next month, one of our local consultants, it's LS3P, is our prime consultant, and they have offices in Raleigh and Asheville. So one of our Asheville folks are going to come and do a presentation to council. So this will be an opportunity for members of the public, for council, to hear more about the process and where we are to date, and also an opportunity to weigh in on the design, if there's things we haven't thought about or considered or would like to consider moving forward. It wouldn't be too late. So that is the plan for September. Other big news in the administration department is our finance audit begins this week, so that's going to be a little consuming for the next month or so. Moving on to the police department, our community policing initiatives continue. We had a really successful national night out earlier this month. It's funny who you ask, you get different numbers as to how many attendees, but I felt fairly comfortable estimating between 150, 200, might have been a little bit more, might have been a little less. You know, nobody was there with a ticker counting people as they came in and out. And it's several hours, so you don't have that many people at one time. People kind of float in, they float out. But it was a really fun event, and I can see that this can really grow in years to come, and it's a great way for our police department to connect with our community. We've also made some progress on staffing. We have filled one of our detective positions, and that's an internal or a position that was filled internally. Officer Brad Wright will be moving into that first of the 2 detective vacancies that we have. Of course, that means we have to backfill the patrol officer positions, and so we continue our efforts at recruiting patrol officers. We've made progress on that front as well, and so hopefully if all goes as planned, we will be backfilling Officer Wright's position here shortly, which for about a split second, we will be fully staffed as far as patrol officers go until we fill the remaining detective position and our captain position, in which case we're going to create more vacancies and we're going to have to keep recruiting. So we think maybe 1, probably 2 more patrol officers, and we should be good at that point. And we have made some good contacts with folks, and so things are going about as well as can be expected. The last thing I wanted to mention for police is that we've made contact with a local architect who had done some design work for the town before, looking at redesigning or kind of upfitting the lower level basement space. Our evidence technician doesn't have a proper evidence processing space, and so with the captain position and having to find an office for our captain, we thought now is the time for us to dust off those plans for redoing the basement space to create not just an office for our technician, but some evidence processing space as well. So, and a lot of the work's already been done by the architect. She'll just need to make some updates, and then she'll be able to submit for permits. Fortunately for us, one of our local churches, it's New Life Community Church. Thank you, Officer, Chief. Thanks. New Life Community Church has offered to help fund those upfits, and so we're really thankful to them for that, because that makes this work and the ability to kind of make this building work for as long as possible until we can get new town hall underway.
I'd like, on that national night out, and the chief will have to help me, the officer that let the kids wedding with the super soaker and the balloons, that was the best thing ever. And he stood there and took that all night.
For hours.
I'd say there's a good 15, 20, maybe more kids just pounded him with water balloons, and he just had a big time too. And that really smile on them kids' face.
Yeah. It was
I
good.
couldn't believe it done.
Okay, so
He was in uniform, they just loved it. They just
Yeah,
felt
they had
it.
fun.
So, Chief, note for next year, water balloons, a
Water balloons and
check,
exactly,
and super soakers.
Sergeant Beer was the smartest of all this, because that kept him cool while we were all
Yeah.
Exactly.
taking out. I sat in the thing of it first.
That was cool though.
It
They
was great.
soaked him, boy, with them super soakers.
So that was a good success. Other departmental updates, you've heard from Bob about the stormwater program, so I'm not going to add any more to that at this time. Parks, we had a couple big successes in the last couple weeks. We have received not just the Craggy Mountain, but now we have also secured the Norfolk Southern Agreement. So these are 2 really big hurdles that we needed in order to move forward with permitting. We are still waiting on the Clomar. That's kind of the last big thing. Hopefully that will be coming soon.
What's
And
a
then
Clomar?
It is a conditional letter of map revision. So this is essentially, because the Whitewater Wave is a structure that's in the river, we have to do what is effectively a engineering study that looks at the hydrology of the river and any impacts that it could potentially cause and how we would mitigate those impacts. And then that has to be reviewed by the state before we can move forward. So that's what we're waiting for right now. Once that's done, we should be ready. We'll get permits in hand, and we'll be able to move forward with our RFP and hopefully construction. So that's exciting. So progress is slow, but it's happening. So Silverline Park restrooms and master plan interviews are next week. So this is the council may recall we've discussed prioritizing restrooms, permanent restroom facilities at Riverside Park. Silverline Park. And this design work that prioritizes the restrooms, but we want to do it in the context of, properly in the context of the site. So if we're going to add other features in the future, such as the pickleball courts, we want to make sure we don't stick the restrooms in the middle of the optimal location for pickleball courts. So we want the designers to kind of study and give us a concept plan, a master plan for the rest of the park, but give us detailed drawings for the restrooms. So that's how the RFQ is structured. So those interviews are next week, so hopefully we'll get that design work underway soon. And then last week, we had the Asheville Pickleball Association at the Parks and Greenways Advisory Committee. We reached out to them thinking that there could be opportunity for collaboration for the pickleball courts at Silverline Park. They were very enthusiastic. We thought a meeting or having them come and speak at PGAC would be a good first step, just to kind of hear more about them and their priorities and what they see as how they may be able to help with this initiative. No decisions have been made, no action steps necessarily about collaboration. If nothing else, they're a great resource when it comes to pickleball, and we're happy to have made their contact. So, Public Works, the salt shed, we've already discussed. Work should begin at the end of the month, and we're expecting a 90-day build, so well in advance of bad weather, so we should be in good shape for the upcoming season. In the planning department, we're focusing primarily on code amendments. We will have some steep slope updates that will come before council in September next month, and we'll have some other sort of cleanup amendments that will follow in the months after, but we're prioritizing steep slope updates at this point. We're also focusing on short-term rental enforcement. I did my report last month, and in that report, I let everybody know that we had issued 70 notices of violation, but that we expected that much of that would be resolved and come into compliance. And I'm happy to say 30 days later, about half of those are resolved or on their way to being resolved. Of those 70 notices issued, we've had a number that were really homestays. So no obstacle really in being able to operate. They just needed to follow through on the permit. They were just unaware that a permit was required, and they just had to go through that process. And for the database that Granicus helps us with, it's not always clear that it's a homestay. So it just automatically flags any listing that is renting on a short-term basis. So that's why I say when we see the number of how many short-term rentals there are or how many that are unidentified, we shouldn't get overly alarmed because we don't know yet how many are really in compliance or couldn't come into compliance.
Jen, how many permits have you issued for short-term rentals?
Do you know, Ricky, approximately?
Rough.
I think it's a hard thing to answer because there aren't a lot of permits that have been issued because most of them are grandfathered. And so how we record those as being lawful wouldn't
But
necessarily
whether
be.
they're grandfathered or not, they still need a permit, correct?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
but some of them have permits. So you see the third bullet says 13 produced a permit. So folks that we couldn't find any record of them having received a permit walked in the door with a permit that had been issued by the town sometime before. So in those instances, we simply make a copy of that, scan it into our system, so we now do have a permanent record of that. So so that was really helpful, that people were able to, I always tell people, if you don't get a permit, if somebody tells you you don't need a permit, make sure you keep a copy of that email, or, if you get a permit, make sure you save a copy of that permit. The town has made great improvements in the last couple of years in their record keeping, but before that, it's pretty spotty, so. And then we have, another 5 or 6, half dozen or so who are actively working with staff, exploring their options. So they may want to switch to long-term, or they might do monthly rental, which even though for a lot of those folks, it feels like a short-term rental, but we consider it long-term if it's 30 days or more. So it just depends on what their needs are, what option they go with, so. And then we have had 2 requests for appeal forms, and of course, when people ask for that, we supply it. We do try to talk to them a little bit about what an appeal before the Board of Adjustment is, really what the authority of the board is, because sometimes people misunderstand what the purpose of the appeal is. So we do try to counsel them a little bit. While we've handed out some forms, we haven't received any appeals, so knock on wood, we don't receive any, and people find some other option, but but that is technically something that folks could pursue.
What's the plan for the remaining 35, give or take?
So we give folks 30 days. The notice period is typically 30 days to come into compliance, and if somebody contacts us within that 30 days, but they're actively exploring their option, or I think I have a copy of that permit, I need to go check here or there, as long as they're communicating with us, we don't move to the next step. But if we've not heard from anybody, or we've heard from somebody and it's been an extended period of time, they think they have a permit, but then they never show up with that permit, then we move to a citation. If they continue to rent, and we can check their listing. So if they continue to rent, at that point, they're being fined $100 a day, every day that listing stays up. And after that fine accumulates to a certain amount, at some point, then we turn it over for other action, so.
How's the complaints on short-term rentals?
They're not too bad. I mean, we tend to, the ones that we get complaints about tend to be the same ones. So, the neighbors kind of understand the situation, the property owners, they try, some of them are better than others about trying to kind of control the activity and communicate with their lodgers, not to create nuisance issues for their neighbors, but it's not always a perfect system, so. And that concludes my town manager update. If there aren't any other questions, we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Ricky says we have 130 STRs.
130?
130.
Permitted, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't, no.
Okay, all right. Well, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hartwell and Ken, who are going to do the next presentation.
Thank you, appreciate it. Hartwell and I are here representing a group called Plastic Free WNC. It's a coalition of groups, Sierra Club, Mountain True, Southern Environmental Law Center, Christian Care Alliance, Riverlink, Greenworks, and others type thing. But anyway, we have been working for the last 2 years looking at the issue. Many of us have been involved with river cleanups. We're all driving by and we see plastic bags stuck in the trees, in the gutters, so we know it's a problem. So we wanted to look and see what have other communities done. We found that over 500 local governments around the country in 8 states now have plastic bag bans in place. So we said, okay, let's look at them. What can we learn from people that have already done it? And the good news is there's been several studies that have gone back and looked at the effectiveness of those, and we kind of had a chance, and we talked to a number of these communities, and we came up with a model ordinance that we thought was kind of the best practice from looking at all of that information. So that's what we've really been working on and doing, and of course what we're here tonight to ask you to do is to pass a resolution saying you would opt in to a ban when the county passes one. We think it's very important to have one unified set of policies throughout the county, whether in Woodfin, Weaverville, Asheville, or outside the city limits. We need one set of rules so consumers know what the rules are, retailers know what the rules are. So that's what we're trying to do. So I'm going to turn it over to Hartwell to talk a little bit about some of the problems and issues that plastic bags and styrofoam present.
Yeah, as Ken mentioned, we're really behind the times with.
Will you explain what your job is?
Yeah, I'm Hartwell Carson. I'm the French Pod River Keeper with Mountain True.
What does that mean, river keeper?
Mostly it means, we're kind of the eyes and ears of the river. We spend most of our time monitoring the river to determine what the problems are and then try to figure out what those solutions are, whether those are overflowing, sewer manhole or a failing septic or excessive, trash pollution. And that's really how we got to this place. I spent the last 15 plus years with Riverlink and Greenworks and others conducting thousands of river cleanups on our waterway, and every time we go out there, we're picking up the same stuff. We're not making progress out there. It looks great, and people feel great about going to pick up trash out of the river, but the reality is that the trash is there every time, and what we see over and over and over again is plastic pollution. That is by far the most pervasive amount of trash we're picking up out of our waterways, and so that's kind of how I arrived at this issue is, we can spend the next 20 years picking up trash out of our river and make no progress, or we can try to look at a bigger, better solution that has been shown to be very effective across the country and really across the world. It's been done in many places around the world. But I was really surprised when I got into it. You know, I came at it from this, let's clean up our river from trash and let's clean up our greenways and our trails from trash. But was really surprised to find it is a much bigger issue than just trash. And so I think most of us think of it as a trash first issue. But what happens when you throw your plastic bag out, or it flies out of your truck, or however it gets into our environment, is it breaks down into microplastics. And so the stuff never goes away. It just breaks into smaller and smaller pieces. And our data shows that microplastics are pervasive in every sample that we've taken out of the French Broad and all of our waterways around western North Carolina. So it's a big issue. I was really surprised when you take the microplastic sample, you actually have to open the bottle underwater because microplastics are so pervasive that they're in the air and it will contaminate your sample. So it's an issue from breaking down and getting into aquatic life, but it's a huge issue when we're talking about climate too, which is something that, is a big issue with a lot of our local governments these days, is figuring out how to mitigate the effects of climate change. Well, most folks are looking at plastics as a plan B, as we're moving towards electric cars and we're getting more efficient homes and we're moving away from heating oil. The oil industry is looking at plastics as a way to sort of prop up their industry. And the production of plastic around the country contributes to about 116 coal-fired power plants every year. So while folks are working to close down power plants, we're propping them, that amount of pollution is going back into the air with the production of plastics. It's also a huge equity issue because most of these plastics are not recycled. So what we're doing is we're shipping this stuff around the world to poor countries where it's burned and it's used in ways that it shouldn't, and it's polluting around the world. But it's also polluting our streams right here. And usually it's in our poor neighborhoods where you find more and more of these plastics. I mean, whenever folks want to see what the plastic problem looks like, I take them to Nasty Branch or Town Branch, which drains downtown Asheville, historic African-American neighborhood, and it's always a hotbed of, it's a guaranteed, honey hole for finding plastic pollution. And because this stuff is breaking down, it's getting into our environment in every way. It's getting into fish, it's getting into our food, and we actually consume a credit card's worth of microplastics every month, and just in our everyday lives. So it's a big issue, and I think what most people say is, we'll just recycle, we'll increase our recycling. And what we've shown is that plastic recycling is really poorly done. We only recycle about 5% of the amount of plastic bags that are being produced. So the rest of those plastic is being thrown into landfills or being discarded in our waterways. And it's not insignificant. We're talking about 132 million plastic bags are used every year just in Buncombe County. That number is extrapolated from the amount of plastic bags used around the country and the population here in Buncombe County. So recycling and voluntary programs, which have been tried around the country, have been shown to be really ineffective. And what has shown to be super effective are the bans that have been into place. And we're unfortunate that we're behind the times. There's so many local governments have already done this, but we're also kind of fortunate because we've learned a lot from what they've done and how effective it was. And so we've put together what I think is a really comprehensive sort of best practices model ordinance that we want you guys to consider.
So what are we proposing? Basically, it's a couple of things. Let me tell you what it covers and what it doesn't cover. What we're really trying to do is we're looking for the low-hanging fruit. How can we get the big bang for the buck with the least amount of cost and expense, and just to do this, and how can it be implemented? So what we're doing is we're focusing on plastic bags that are given out at the point of sale, at the register, like at the grocery store checkout or at the checkout counter. That's what we're going after. What we're not going after, what this does not include, it doesn't include if you go to Ingles and you get fish and they put it in a plastic bag, or you get bulk items in a plastic bag. Anything in the rest of the store is not included. Same thing with yard waste bags or pet waste bags. Those things are not included. It's what's at the register. But that's still the 132 million that are used for 15 minutes on average. And then they end up in the trash if we're lucky, or they end up in the recycling, and we have to have extra staff at Kirby, and they spend $10,000 a year just in fees to put those in the landfill. So it's a huge problem there. So that's what it's covered and what it doesn't cover. The other thing we're focusing on is styrofoam. you probably have gotten takeout at a restaurant that's in styrofoam, or you go and get your, your drink at the convenience store and it's in a styrofoam cup, type of thing. Those, under our proposed ordinance, would be outlawed. And why do we pick those? There are easy replacements. Many of our restaurants are already using cardboard takeout containers. Many places are using paper cups, so there's a readily available alternative for these. And the other thing is on the plastic
Have you ever
bag.
put soup in cardboard?
Yep,
And what's it lined with to keep it from going through the corner?
there's a film that.
Yes, sir.
it's in there
Yes, sir.
that-
Okay, that's all I wanted you to
Yes, it
say.
doesn't leak.
It's like seeing a paper straw in a plastic bag. That makes no sense to me
Yeah, no,
whatsoever.
I got you. So anyway.
I know you ain't gonna talk to me, but that's my feeling.
No, I understand. Okay, so that's what would be covered, and there's replacements for those. So we think we've got something. The other piece of this is straws would be on request. Because right now, you go into a restaurant, they plop down straws, and whether you want to use them or not. And so we're saying this would be by request. If you got a kid who wants a straw, or you want a straw, you can request one. They're just not thrown out there otherwise, type thing.
But I do have another question for you.
Yeah.
45 years ago, plastic bags was introduced into the grocery deal throughout the nation. Because we were clear cutting forest trees to make the paper with. So why has that changed? We need trees for oxygen.
Good question, great question.
So why are we backing up? Explain to me why we backing up 45 years?
Okay, well, let's start first of all. Because there's been all these groups that have done it, we've been able to do research to find out what actually happens with paper bag usage. And the first thing to keep in mind is the fact that we did a test. We had two folks go into Ingalls, bought the identical same 14, 16 items, went through two separate checkout lines. One got plastic bags, one got paper. All 16 fit in one paper bag, and there was 9 plastic bags. And you know it, you go in, they put 1 or 2 items in a plastic bag.
But that's
So-
not the
So
bag.
it's not a one-to-one replacement type thing. So that's one reason. So
What about the dyeing of the bags? The dyeing of the brown bags, where does that water go?
Well, just to be clear, we're not hoping that everyone goes from plastic to paper. What we're hoping is that everyone goes from plastic to reusable bags. So there is definitely an environmental footprint on a paper bag, you're not wrong.
yeah, you're right.
But people ain't gonna carry their bag, you know that.
Well,
In other places, it's.
Just go, I sit in the parking lot, I don't go in the grocery store.
Councilman, at Ingalls, I'd say half the people bring their own bags these days.
I'd say they don't. I
Well, we
sit
go to
in the
different
parking lot
Ingalls.
every time my wife goes shopping. I don't go in. I do see 1 or 2, hardly ever do I see anybody carry their own bag in. At the Ingalls on Merriman.
We go at different hours, obviously.
Well, because they've done this around the country. it's so-
8 states is what you said.
Do you mind
Okay,
if,
yeah.
maybe you can hang out up there?
let me answer your question, which is a good.
Somebody speak in the microphone so anybody listening at home can hear you guys.
Okay, what I was going to answer this question is that the studies we've been able to do is that in cities that do just the trade, get rid of the plastic bags, replace paper bags, is there's a 50% increase in the use of paper bags. But it's on a much smaller number, because you see very few paper bags being given out at the grocery store. But it's 50% on top of whatever that number is today. But if you add a 10-cent fee for the paper bag,
Now you're getting to the money.
then you only get a 5% increase.
That's right.
So we said, okay, let's encourage people. You'd think a dime
It's all about
might
the
not
money.
encourage people, but it makes people remember to bring those reusable bags in. So we've proposed the 10-cent fee, and it also would be a 40% recycled content. So that's part of our proposal in there. So, okay, let me,
The only other thing I'd add to that is because there've been 500 cities around the country that have done it, they've done some pretty good studies in those places, and they do show that plastic bag consumption drops dramatically, and so does paper bag consumption. And that reusable bag consumption jumps
You talk
dramatically.
about the microplastics getting into our systems. What does that do to us?
Yeah, there's a variety of health studies that show that it's bad for you.
It's
I'm
up
not
in the
I'm
air,
not a
but
doctor, but you don't want to.
I read a lot of articles the last couple of weeks just from my own, and you talk to this person, it's bad for you, talk to this person, it's ain't, there's micro stuff out there that eats the plastic, I don't know what to believe. I do know I need a tree to breathe, though.
For sure.
I do know that for sure.
Yep.
That's why I'll be against this, which it don't matter, but
Okay.
I cannot
So
support
any
it.
other questions on what we're proposing? Yes.
Have you guys given any thought, is there any chance that Sierra Club, Land of Sky, other organizations might be mass producing in Buncombe County cheap reusable bags, maybe some giveaways from businesses, which has happened in all around the country where this ban has taken place?
Great point. One of the things we've done is we've developed what we think would be a model implementation plan, and that involves giving away free reusable bags, particularly to low-income communities. And by the way, that 10-cent fee is not going to be charged to anybody paying with a WIC or EBT card or things like that.
Just us normal.
So that would be out there. And we think, we haven't approached the TDA yet, but I would think they would love to have every tourist leave with a bag that says, "I love Asheville," or "I love, the mountains."
Woodfin, I love Woodfin.
Yeah, I love Woodfin, whatever kind of thing. So we think there's a lot of opportunities to get some free funding. So we're not asking you guys to spend money unless you choose to, because if you want to brand Woodfin with your "I love Woodfin" bags to give away, that can certainly happen. So anyway, so that's what is in there. So let's talk about enforcement, because I'm sure Shannon's sitting there saying, "I don't have any extra staff to be spending a whole bunch of time enforcing this." We designed this in a way that it shouldn't take any. First of all, we talked to a lot of these places that have put them in, and we said, "How many complaints do you?" And first of all, it's citizen complaint driven. We're not asking the police department to drive around and look who's giving out bags. If a citizen would say, it'd be nice to have a website so people could report if they think of retailers violating this, and then you send a form letter. And so it's anywhere from 5 complaints a year to, in big cities, some bigger places, 15 a month. So it's not a big deal out there. So that, we don't want that to happen. And so, and the idea is hopefully this form letter educates the business. There is provisions for a fine that if somebody is just blatant and you get tons of complaints, you send somebody out to say, "Look, if you don't get in compliance, we'll start fining you," or something type of thing.
But isn't it true that there's no UV protection in these plastic bags that they use, right?
I have no idea.
There's not.
UV?
Within 2 weeks, they start disintegrating.
Oh, yeah.
The reason they're lasting so long is we're burying them in the landfill. To me, we need to figure out some way to recycle these bags instead of burying them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We'd love to have them recycled, but, we've got every grocery store in town has recycle spots, so it's as convenient as can be, and only 5% are getting recycled, so it's just not working. Okay. So anyway, and big retailers, by the way, are already doing this, and they come into compliance immediately. And if you go, all the fast food places now have gotten no longer using plastic bags. Even my Subway, the last one, the last couple of times I've gone in, they got paper bags. So it's already happening. So it's not, a huge deal from that standpoint. Any other questions on compliance? Okay. All right, legal history, can we legally do it? And I should probably let Eric answer this question, but we've been working with Southern Environmental Law Center and Duke Law Center, some really high-powered attorneys to look into this in North Carolina. It's one thing to do it in South Carolina, it's another thing to do it in North Carolina. So can we legally do it in North Carolina? And the answer is yes. North Carolina law provides a strong foundation for local regulation of single-use plastics. In fact, they actually say that you should stop waste at the source, which is exactly what this ordinance does with plastic bags. Now, some people bring up and say, well, the Outer Banks, didn't they used to have a plastic bag ban, and didn't the legislature repeal that? The answer is yes, but that's very different. They didn't pass that. The legislature passed a law and repealed the law. In this case, this is a local ordinance that you're doing, so that situation does not apply. So feel comfortable from all the legal analysis. Now, nobody else in North Carolina's done it. In Buncombe County we were thinking it would be the first, we'll probably be the second. Durham seems to be on track to do it maybe as early as September, maybe ahead of Buncombe County. But, so we're on the early edge here. But a number of other places we've talked to are interested in this. Nobody wants to go first. So that's kind of the situation. So I'm going to turn it over to Hartwell to talk about some of the outreach we've done to say, is this something people want or not want?
Yeah, so we've done extensive outreach over the last 2 years to figure out what do businesses think about it, what do community members think about it, what impact is it going to have on businesses. And the good news is we've received incredibly broad support in all of those surveys. And those are surveys done by the City of Asheville, by the Chamber of Commerce, by our organization. So we're getting consistent high feedback. Over 80% have responded in favor in all of the surveys that have been conducted by all of those parties I mentioned. The City of Asheville said their survey was the second most highly responded to survey that they've ever done, with over 80% support of the policy. The other survey that we did was figuring out what businesses would be impacted. So we did a call with about 100 businesses, called about 100 businesses and restaurants, and figured out, are you using these products already? And the vast majority of folks are already not using plastic bags. So that's good news because it doesn't impact them at all. Most folks were also not using styrofoam. So the impact is pretty minimal on businesses, and there's broad support for it. We also did extensive outreach to equity groups to try and figure out, how is this going to affect lower income folks? And we received a lot of good feedback, a lot of support there, and then a lot of advice, particularly, which is sort of how we, came up with our implementation plan, which included the reusable bags that Ken talked about. And those would be focused in, low income areas to make sure that folks aren't, being burdened financially on this. So a very encouraging sign from businesses and from community members.
Okay, we went through this pretty quickly because I know you guys have a long agenda tonight, but questions that we didn't answer that you come to your mind? If not, thank you guys so much for giving us the opportunity to present this, and thank you for hopefully supporting this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I may, if anybody on the council wants to talk about the health effects of microplastics later and in medicine.
Who are you, sir?
Yeah, do you mind
I'm sorry.
introducing yourself?
Yeah.
I'm John Andrew, I live here in Woodfin.
Do you mind
Yeah,
just so people at home can hear it?
Mr. Lunsford, if you did ask about the medical and the health effects of microplastics, and if you want to talk later, we can talk about that. I am in medicine, and they
Are
are.
you a doctor?
I'm a PA. And
You're
they,
what?
a PA, a physician assistant.
Assistant.
Yeah, and they are shockingly
The reason I
harmful.
said that, I read several articles last 2 or 3 weeks all over the country and other countries, and just depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, the consensus is that they're very harmful.
Yeah.
So but if you want to talk about that later, I'm happy to.
Thank you for speaking up.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to new business. The first item is a resolution 2023-013 to reduce single-use plastics, which we've been talking about. And I want to say that I'm not opposed to it, but I would like to have it put off for a month so we can notify our businesses and notify the people in Woodfin to show full transparency so we don't just spring something on people. And
Mayor?
and I've got some questions too about 1 or 2 paragraphs in the ordinance that I'd just like to discuss with somebody.
How would you suggest we inform the residents? We don't even have a list of residents. How would we do that?
Do it by newsletter.
Special newsletter?
So I have a couple of questions that are more sort of practical. If it's okay, Mr. Mayor, let me just go ahead and launch into them. First off, as a policy matter, I think it is absolutely commendable, ought to be implemented. I've seen things lately it's shocking, and Ryan, I know you could probably find something that says things on both sides. I would be very skeptical of anything that says we don't know or maybe it's not a problem. Because you're talking about an industry, and this is the stuff that's just come to light for me recently, that has gone way out of its way to bury the bad effects of carbon in the air, and they knew about it. And the plastics recycling industry is just an absolute scam. It is amazing to see what they have done. If you look right here, that symbol, now they actually have now appropriated the recycling symbol. But that symbol you see everywhere that has the number on it doesn't mean anything about it being recyclable. It just means what kind of plastic it's made out of. And the plastics industry made it law almost everywhere in all kinds of other countries, but they have to put that on there, so when you buy it, you think it's not a big deal because it can be recycled. And it can't be recycled. And so there's a lot out there that really opened my eyes about how much has been put over on us about it all. So I'm sorry, that's not a legal.
You do bring up a valid point. You know, we used to be able to send this stuff to Pakistan. All the newsprint went to China and Indonesia. Those countries aren't buying it anymore. So these have to go in landfills or they've got to be burned. There is no use for them in the United States of America. So these things are accumulating like crazy. Kirby can't do anything with them. They can't sell
Make it a
them.
mandatory that they have to recycle.
There's no use for them. These can become plastic decks through the company of Trex. My deck at home is made from used, guaranteed 92% used containers for orange juice, things like that. So far, this is such crap, garbage, that it has no useful purpose other than to bring your groceries home. Well, and to line your trash can, like, we've talked about before, but we got to do this for the kids. We got to do this for your grandchildren.
If I could just intervene one comment, and that is curbside recycling is our local recycling facility. It's here in Woodfin, and they have graciously offered, an opportunity for folks to tour their facility. A number of our staff went and toured the facility, and they have employees who do nothing but stand online picking out plastic bags. Most of their staff in that building, that's what they're doing. Most of the recycling sorting is automated. The human labor that's involved is purely to pull out the plastic, the non-recyclable plastic. And I think for anybody who is interested in this issue, I would really encourage them to talk to the folks at Curbside and tour the facility, because it's very eye-opening. So.
I wanted to say one thing, and I am obviously voting for this because I'm looking toward our environment long-term. What I had thought about was we were doing this quickly, and that I would like for us to be able to reach out to our businesses in Woodfin and get their input on this. Our business association is under construction, but then I look at it, and that's only a small number of businesses that we have. The only attempt for us trying to get a list of all the businesses in Woodfin was through the fire marshal, and the problem it created was that I could get, using the mill at Riverside as an example, it shows you the owner. It does not show you the 100 businesses contained within. So any effort for us to try to get full input from all of our businesses would take years. And my plan is to vote for our environment and for the future of Woodfin.
Councilwoman Irvin, because it sounds like you're pointing out the reasons why it shouldn't be delayed, I'll just add one more to that list. This goes into effect at a future date that we don't know. So it goes into effect when Buncombe County passes an ordinance. It does not go into effect this month. I don't believe it's on their agenda. There's not an imminent change happening such that I would be in favor of delaying it. So I think that's just one more reason to proceed.
And I'm sorry to jump back in there, but that's where I actually have a question to make sure I understand and we all understand what we're going to do tonight if you adopt this resolution. I think the legal analysis is correct that you have very broad authority as a municipality in the state of North Carolina to define, abate, regulate situations that are injurious to health, and you get to decide what that is. And so it's definitely in your wheelhouse for ordinance making authority. I don't have any problem with that. This is not itself an ordinance, but it is a resolution, and you have authority, actually counties have authority under chapter 158 that they get their ordinance making authority through to enforce their ordinances inside your city limits when you adopt a resolution that says this is applicable here. I think I don't know that I've ever had a situation where the municipality itself is enforcing. I don't know who enforces this once you do this. Because that is the intent, right? It's a 153A provision that said, and I'm sorry to pick on you, Barry. You were the law school, it's not your fault. That it's the 153A provision that says county ordinances can be made applicable inside of cities' limits if they, by resolution, adopt it, and that's what we're doing here, right?
Yes, I think that is the intention. If we would like to deviate from that and change the language such that we would have, upon the county adopting an ordinance, the same ordinance brought to us for consideration, and we could separately adopt it, we could certainly do that as well. But those are roughly the same thing. But I have no strong feelings either way about how we do that.
I think it is too. I just want to make sure it's clear to everybody, you're not adopting an ordinance tonight. So it's not the situation that if the council adopts this tonight, that Ingalls at, New Stock Road is out of compliance tomorrow because this passed. It will take the county commission adopting their own ordinance. It's not one yet. This is just a resolution.
Well, I think even if it's adopted tonight, I still think we need to notify the citizens of Woodfin, plus the businesses in Woodfin, so they've got some ideas. It don't just hit them cold and they're thinking, well, what are we supposed to do and how are we going to do this?
I agree. I think we definitely should publicize it.
Our goal is to publish our newsletter, our summer newsletter, and get it out by the end of the month. So we could certainly put a story in here about that.
Yeah.
Kind of the proposed ordinance, I'm sorry, I should have said this when I presented, calls for a 6 to 9 month lead time between the.
Ken, I'm sorry, could I ask you to speak?
But this is not a ordinance, it's a resolution.
Right, a resolution.
Speaking to the proposed.
What I'm saying, the proposed ordinance that we're hoping, that
county
we're proposing the county will adopt, has a built-in 6 to 9 month, and they'll decide which lead time from the time it passes until it goes into effect, to notify people, to give businesses a chance to work through their existing inventory of plastic bags and styrofoam and get everything set up, and also for do a pretty significant public outreach to let people know about it. So we don't want to surprise anybody. Your point's well taken, Mayor, that nobody wants to get surprised here. So that was built into it, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that when I was presenting.
I'd like to see somebody do something on how much CO gas is emitted cutting our forest, from chainsaws to transportation to the pulpwood industry to, man, we're talking about hurting the environment 10 times worse than those plastic bags.
The good thing about having a topic of that much public interest is that there are those, and so you can tell, like, by tier what is best, which would be reusable cotton bags, what would be second best, which is not ideal, and then what would be worse, which is plastic bags. And
So we're trying to curb air pollution, and this board is so adamant about cutting trees, and now we're gonna cut trees to make paper bags with.
Yeah, and that's why there's
That's
a.
not factual, Councilman.
It is.
It's not.
It's just not rational. So the way that government acts is you can prohibit some things, like what we would be doing with plastic bags, or you can discourage other things, like charging a fee to discourage people from using paper bags. It's just level of pressure. You gotta give some people some sort of outcome, but
Where does that fee go?
But that's what government, I believe it stays with the retailer. And so that's what government does. It corrects behavior that is antisocial or damaging. And so this is just squarely within the realm of what government does. And I think that selecting by priority, by encouraging people first towards reusable reusable cotton bags, then paper, and last plastic, I think they've got the order correct, and I think they've got the level of pressure to encourage those types of behavior correct as well. So I think it's a clear win on what you're mentioning, the CO2 output. It's an obvious win on the ecological one. There's not a comparable argument for why paper bags would be better from an ecological standpoint. We don't see storm drains clogged with paper bags. That's not the nature of them. So you're getting a positive result on the CO2 side. Say that's the environmental side. You're getting a positive result on the ecological side. So it seems like a clear, from a policy perspective, cost-benefit win.
Okay, well, I guess everybody's familiar with the resolution. Do we have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, but the motion passes 5-1. Next item is a public hearing in consideration of ordinance 2023-020, request to conditionally rezone 89.7 acres located on Goodman Road from Mountain Village, MV to Mountain Village conditional. The property is identified in the Buncombe County tax record as Penn so-and-so. The property owner is Charter Mountain Properties, LLC, and the project contact is Teresa Carroll on behalf of the property owner. And Ricky Hurley, you want to explain this?
Yeah, all right. It's been we've been speaking with Miss Carroll and her design team since what, first of the year, Miss Carroll? Was that?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've had a lot of conversation. But thank you for the introduction, Mayor. As you stated, it is 89.7 acres. That's really at the northeast corner of Riverside Drive and Goodman Road. We'll walk through some maps here and some plans. So the hatched area, again, we'll say thank you, Marie Biddix, who's not here tonight, for making maps for us. This is the hatched area is the property in question. You'll see directly to the west for orientation, that's Buncombe County. That's the former landfill site that has the solar panels as you drive up Riverside. To the east, you will see the basically defunct or kind of dormant Altura development. That's kind of like in limbo right now. And immediately to the south, you'll see a mixture of some R10, R43, some detached single family, and the dark blue is the edge of MSD's property. And to the far north, we have some more scattered small, medium lot housing. You can't tell, but right where it says mountain on the slide, you see like this dark gray area. That is the steep slope area. That's your 2,200 foot elevation contour. So you can kind of see it comes in just a little bit there at the middle of the property in that northeast corner. That's about 4.5 acres affected, just to let you know. So majority of this property, even though it's rolling, here's got some slope to it, is most part not subject to our steep slope regulations. Here's an aerial photo, 2019, early 20. The roads that are on this map are not actually on the ground. That is from the original or prior plan approval. And so these are 911 address lines, basically. So this will all change if the plan is approved. But you can see to the far left, you can see the water of the French Broad River. All right, so now we have a plan, but we've turned it sideways. So north is left, east is up. Again, the light blue areas on the up are the steep slope areas. You'll see, just to call those out, you see a little bit of the road kind of clips that in a couple places, and maybe 1 or 2 house lots may eat into the steep slope. So very minimal amount of land disturbance. Jason done a good job on it. So what was it? They are planning to disturb basically a 1/4 acre of land, and they're allowed to disturb 2/3. So they're not disturbing very much at all, so they're preserving that. As far as layout, you see there's 2 driveways coming off of, 2 streets coming off the northern and middle portion. That's due to NCDOT is limiting the number of curb cuts or access points to Riverside Drive due to sight lines along that road. They have done initial TIA, traffic impact analysis, back with their initial approval. That needs to be updated, and they will be doing that update if this plan is moving forward and gets approved.
Ricky, on
Yes,
that,
sir.
was there anything indicated by that, like adding a light or anything else?
No, in that original TIA, they didn't have any, they didn't add like left turn lanes, intersection improvements, even left turn lanes down at like Elk Mountain Road. There was no spiraling out, but they have agreed to, in one of the conditions, that whatever the TIA requires, downstream or upstream, they'll do it.
Was the original based off of the however many, like 150 or whatever the original plans were? Or?
It was closing in on 300.
Okay,
It's just
okay.
a few dollars north of what we got before us tonight. So this is not a huge leap in number. And I think John can tell us the exact number here in a minute, but I think it was like 5 or 10 houses, if I recall, dwelling units.
Yeah, thank you.
So as I was speaking of that, the original plan was 176 units. We're now looking at 300. You're like, why are they back? It's because with the conditional zoning standards for the town, if you have 20 or more dwelling units, you have to come before this board. This case, there was a substantial increase in number of units, 124. That's going to trigger a review again by this board. The road layout you see is the exact same road layout they basically had before, maybe some little twist here and there. But what they come up with, adding increase the number of units due to infrastructure costs. I think everybody's heard inflation for the past year and a half. What I was told was to help get the cost ratio per unit on investment back down, they wanted to increase the number. So just kind of catch up. So again, to the right is Goodman Road. As you see, there's some red lines or dashed lines here in the middle of the project. They're planning to phase the development in 4 different phases with a connection, hopefully, and plan to the future Altura development. They need that connection for the fire marshal's office because that section exceeds 200 dwelling units, so they need that number. Otherwise, if they don't have the connection, when they get to phase 4, they'll have to do at least a residential sprinkler system in phase 4. We're just designating phase 4 as residential sprinkler system. That way, I'm not counting unit 199, 200, so we had some conversations to say, regardless what goes in. Let's keep going here. The northern phase 3, the northern does not, it meets the fire marshal. They were good with that portion. The majority of the development is detached single family. You'll see those on the kind of the right side of the screen, the yellow looking gold boxes. That is our, what I'll call a twin home or a duplex style single family. So there's 2 units in each of those boxes. So there's 92 dwelling units or 46 boxes on the plan here. Let me go on here and move on. Oh yeah, let me also call out too, it is 89 acres, and as I said, that the majority of the project is not in steep slope. They're actually only disturbing 42% of the overall tract, which is 37.8 acres. I'm looking at the top right here, if you're looking, if you can see. And the overall impervious is 11.13, which is just above 12.4%. So that would be one of the conditions we added to, was to limit that grading area to just I added one about 44% grading area to give them a little bit of wiggle room because we know field conditions change. And I think we put the overall impervious around about 13%. So that would be something that has to be limited to. As a side note, Mountain Village allows a 70% impervious area up to. So you could do something a lot more intensive in any case. So we're back looking north-south again. They will be required to provide stormwater according to the town's adopted stormwater plan or ordinance because they're grading more than 1 acre of land. So there will be quality and quantity devices. There's a lot of little bitty blue boxes up here, as you'll see. I think me and Shannon counted somewhere, what, 15 devices, Shannon? So there's a lot of little bitty sub-basins. So to capture the water for each of those little draws, they're having to direct in some sort of device to some degree. And of course, that kind of shows you that this property basically undulates. It rolls kind of perpendicular to Riverside Drive. So as you drive up Riverside Drive, you'll see a little holla, a hill, holla, hill, up and down as you move north to south. With the lowest point of the property in that lower southwest corner, Goodman and Riverside Drive, that's the lowest point. Your highest point is obviously the far northeast. So the property kind of runs from southwest and climbs to the northeast. And again, you see that gray areas is the steep slope. These are just some provided elevations that just kind of, we'll let Ms. Carroll explain that, but just kind of gives you an idea of maybe what the character they're looking for in the development. Again, just kind of shows you that's something trying to be more of the mountain cottage style, which is what Mountain Village wants. Before I get into the slide here, one of the big modifications is they're asking not to provide sidewalks along Riverside Drive and Goodman, and that's to a large part due to the topography on both roads. That's about 3,700 linear feet of sidewalk on Riverside Drive and approximately 700 feet on Goodman. With respect to Goodman, at the planning board meeting, planning board did lean in, as well as staff and development team did agree to, is a impervious or paved path along Goodman or parallel to Goodman Road that's off street to allow for pedestrian connection from somewhere when Altura or whatever it becomes gets built. We have some sort of connection back to the east, back to Riverside Drive in this approximate or rough area.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe I'm not understanding the map properly. Are there going to be sidewalks on the interior streets?
There are no sidewalks planned.
None in the project at all?
Not in the
Okay.
plan in itself. So as you can see here, is you've got, this is the southwest corner, talk about the low spot. Looking here to the front right, and we're looking north. And then here's about halfway up, the extent of the property looking south. You can kind of see that there's some, it's kind of a quick cut at the edges margin of road, and you kind of jump into the property. That's probably, it doesn't look like it, but remember, this is a Google Street View, so they take these pictures at about 7-8 feet above the ground. So this is probably about an 8-foot high cut. Again, this is almost to the solar farm. And again, you see there's kind of some quick cuts in this area. I mentioned the sidewalk. And then just a technical thing was the LED fixtures. Our lighting code is kind of older. It calls for sodium, so we're just allowing the LED. But I do want to get back to the sidewalk discussion, so we'll roll back up here to this plan. So they're setting their own setbacks from Mountain Village. As everybody realizes, Mountain Village is very flexible in lot area, lot width, setbacks, so they're setting their own. And to minimize the amount of land disturbance, what I understood, Councilman, is that they're running the ridges with these roads, and so the houses or the dwellings will be off as you slope away from the road, and as you add other additional infrastructure, it chases or pushes the house down the hill. I haven't walked all this myself. Me and Shannon made a couple site visits and looked. We were able to observe more from Goodman and along Riverside Drive. So
These, on this
Yes,
diagram,
sir.
they all look very close to the street.
yeah, I think they're proposing about 25 feet from the edge of pavement.
What's the setback requirement?
They set their own.
They set their own.
Yeah, Mountain Village, you do not have any setbacks. So again, we don't have a minimum lot size, so it's part of that, yes,
There's
sir.
no business case to set them back further than that I can think of. With this many, this close together, why would they do that?
To push them, set them that close or set them,
Push them much further back, I mean, how do you make the economics of that work?
that may be more of a question for the
Okay.
design team,
I'll
because
save it.
I don't have any practical,
I
like,
think
you know,
what Ricky's saying is if you add signage.
Yeah, it
it's
pushes.
going to take 5-6 feet, he's going to push everything else back
Yeah.
another 5-6
Yeah.
feet.
These
So
are-
that will cause more disturbance.
These gonna be public or private streets? If they're public, then we have the first how many feet? We have the right of way on anyway, it's not gonna push anything back.
Just from a construction standpoint. a
So
design
8 feet,
standpoint.
big deal.
Well, it's just, well, if you take that many homes and you push them all back 6 feet or however many feet from the sidewalk, it's going to create that much more disturbance. And in steep slope areas, it can augment, so if you have a slope
But
that you're
very
dealing with.
very little of this is steep
and-
slope, I thought.
Well, but there's still a lot of topography. It might not be
Well, I
above
understand.
2,200 feet in elevation, but you still have a lot of steepness.
Okay,
So
I-
if you push it 6 feet back, you might cause not 6 feet additional disturbance, you may end up with effectively causing 12 feet of disturbance because you're running.
Fine with me.
greater than- yeah.
I'll save my questions and comments for the developer.
yeah. But that was the rationale, but that, I will say, Councilman, that was the rationale explained to us, and I think when we had the planning board meeting, was that it just pushed, and it's not a 6 foot more, it almost exponentially increases land disturbance.
I appreciate
Yeah.
both of you.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, I just let you
More
know.
appropriate, I should save that anyway.
Yeah,
so-
yeah, anyway, so we'll just let you know where we were at.
Gotcha.
But, so, again, as far as like the walking trail, you'll see it to the far right where it says Goodman. There's like the white line that kind of connects almost to the Altura property line. So approximately that area is what we were looking for, is that kind of multi-use path that would be at least available to the public, so that if anything develops in the Goodman Road or the Altura, we have a future connection. Right now, there's like, I did ride through Altura before, in between meetings, and a big portion of the property has been paved. They've built most of the roads out. There's like a road bed in place that could potentially allow for somebody to walk or bike, scooter from the New Bridge interchange back through the neighborhoods and actually walk out this way. And so hopefully that would, at some point in the future, we'll have a connection back to Weaverville Highway, and then maybe eventually, if the state's able to get some greenways or transportation paths up Riverside Drive or the river, we'll have some future connections. That may be 20, 30 years from now, but that's the point of this conversation tonight.
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm looking here at number 14 under Exhibit D, where it's talking about access to the 300 single-family and duplex homes shall be approved and permitted via the internal private streets.
Yeah,
They'll all be
So
private
they'll all
streets.
be private streets.
private streets, yeah.
Town can't take them over anyway for 5 years because we have ordinance
Yeah.
against that.
And I think Shannon would say, we're working on a policy, but we would typically not take over streets until things were substantially constructed, and streets still have to meet DOT subdivision standards anyway. So we still have to have it, whether the town takes that on, at some future council, we can't say, could take a
Okay.
different turn, but even if it is private, it would still need to meet that road cross-section for base and paving.
But the intention, as stated, is to have private streets.
Correct.
That's what, the town can't take them over 5 years.
What is that from?
It's an ordinance town enacted several years back.
Were you aware of this?
I'm not familiar with that ordinance, or an ordinance like that. It might have been maybe an old
It's-
policy.
It's there. That was make sure that the roads were in compliance, and once they started breaking apart or whatever, then the town wouldn't be responsible for them right off.
Well, my
Don
understanding,
Hensley made the motion, it was passed. Now when, I couldn't tell you. That's probably been 8, 9 years ago. 10 years ago.
I know what we did when we revisited this. I thought what we did was we said that they have to give us a warranty for a
Yes.
period of time.
Right.
I didn't know if what we did subsequently, if that replaced it or not, but
Oh, no, I wouldn't think it did.
We're working on a policy for street acceptance. We have a draft together that'll come before council here before long. The policy is intended to try to give developers some confidence that if they meet certain criteria, the town will agree to accept the roads. But as it is today, the town doesn't have to accept any road. I mean, somebody can petition the town to take over a road, but you don't have to accept it. There's nothing that obligates us to do that. We're trying to think very carefully about road acceptance because it is a financial burden on the town and the taxpayers. But at the same time, if we're trying to keep costs down for our residents, saddling a community with private road maintenance isn't the best way to keep prices down. So it's a balancing act. So our focus is to try to get the roads constructed soundly so that they will last. We have a number of conditions or instances in the town where we accepted roads that were not in good condition or were premature, they were not fully constructed, and so that's an issue. The new policy would not have us accept anything until it's substantially built out, because the other problem with roads is the damage that comes from construction. So we might be able to talk more about it, but I think any development, it's always going to start as private roads, and then at some point they could become public.
And the only dedication we're talking about it's proposed as a condition is along Riverside and Goodman Road for future potential easement for use, but not the roadways or the trails. That's all.
No, that's all going to be private.
Thank you. And so back to this map again, as they just kind of alluded to, so you'll see on the bottom or along Riverside Drive, there's a red kind of highlighted, I know it's kind of underneath, but you probably see it best, kind of this area where it says Riverside Drive, you see some light red. That's the dedicated, or we talked earlier today, maybe like some sort of unrevocable or at least a 20-foot easement for future multimodal bike ped facilities in that area that they would provide to the town. So that it would just be reserved. So when the timing's right and all the stars align, at some point in the future, there'll be a place to, again, pick up and increase that road width and or provide that facility, not necessarily road width, but increase that facility. And most of the other white lines that you'll see weaving around, that's the community trails that would be in lieu of the sidewalk. So you'll see there's a lot that connect different cul-de-sacs and pods of the neighborhood back to other portions of the neighborhood. So you could technically walk from one end of the neighborhood from the other on streets and trails. Let's see here. And of course, I think I should mention too that of the open space that you see, all that green trees, at least 25 acres will be reserved as open space, like guaranteed not to be disturbed. So there might be a little bit of wiggle room, but we don't want trees to be cut even if it is not developed. So they're going to at least indicate 25 acres out of the 89 as reserved for permanent open space. All right. Is there any questions, or do we need to walk through? I know there's a lot of conditions on Exhibit D. Is there anything specifically you want to walk through line by line on those? I just want to make sure that everybody knows the conditions that are proposed, the council's agreeable to those, before we bring the applicant up and their design team. Yes, sir.
I'm not in agreement with 18A, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I live in a neighborhood that never should have been allowed to be built without sidewalks. Other projects have been built adjacent to it. We now, as Councilman Butler can attest to, we have a serious public safety issue because there are no sidewalks. And as more and more residents have grown, people are walking in the street with their dogs, babies in carriages. If you don't have sidewalks, how are you going to have a sense of community? If you don't have sidewalks, where is somebody handicapped going to walk? Not on a trail. Where is a dad with the baby in the stroller going to go? I would strongly, I'm not in favor of this without a condition of internal sidewalks if we're able to do that. I think it's a bad idea. You're missing a huge opportunity to create a great community as opposed to just a subdivision. And so I would propose amending 18A personally.
All right, before I turn this over to the applicant, I just want to point out that, we did, like on condition 12, specifically enumerate that short-term rentals would be prohibited in this development, just to call that explicitly. And then also want to make sure that everybody was aware of probably the last condition, number 25, that the conditional zoning, they're requested for 3 years to allow them, just if the project is approved, to go through the process of actually doing construction drawings and work through permit with Buncombe County for erosion control, and to get moving forward. It may take, still got to go through sewer and water approvals, extension with the state. You're talking about potentially 18 months to get there. So hence the 36-month request, just to call that. We normally do 2 years. You can do up to 5, but we'll make sure you've seen that it was 3, because that, I know we get questions all the time, like, how long is the project approved for?
Maria had a kind of related question. The previous approval that they had, that's expired now, right?
I'll have to double check on it. It was closing in. If it's not expired yet, it's close. But, this one, they're back here. They initiated this all with us, not due to expiration, but due to the cost inflation of development.
Last question I had, I contacted town staff about making the multimodal easement along Riverside Drive irrevocable. Was the applicant acceptable with that?
Yeah, we've already
right.
talked to the design team, and they actually got, like, right before this meeting, another plan in that says irrevocable easement.
Yeah, and the reason for that is there's a statute that lets you withdraw a dedication like that after a certain number of years, and so just putting that off the table means that it actually stays an option.
Yeah. So we'll update the condition in here, number 22 would be updated before we have them sign that, if this project moves forward tonight.
Just a point of clarification too, with conditional zoning, the conditions come from the applicant, so the council can make suggestions to changes to conditions, but ultimately it will be the applicant, the property owners, who decide whether or not they can accept that condition or that change. And if they can't, then the conditions stay the way they are, and the council will just have to vote on whether they can support.
And do they tell us that tonight?
If they want to vote tonight, yes.
Okay, gotcha.
All right. So, Teresa, do you want to kick off, or do you want to have Jason or John?
Let's start with the engineer.
Vote against it.
Okay. And just any of y'all for it, just remember, as Shan said, we'll make sure that you come up to address the board so we can capture for Facebook Live and also for Gina when she does the minutes. Jason, I can leave the conditions up here on my,
A green card
so that
as
you
well.
can work off that, just so you also have to air up and down here. Okay. That's just Exhibit D, so if we can.
Sidewalks in your neighborhood. That's why you push the baby in the street.
Yeah.
I know. That's not a best practice.
Good evening. My name's Jason Gillen. I'm Vice President of Site Design Studio. We're a land planning landscape architecture firm and project manager for this. In the essence of time, we've been here almost 2 hours, but just getting started on this agenda item. Is there any other questions that council has for us or topics of conversation that you would like to discuss, either in the conditions or project-wise? And then I'd be happy to start addressing the questions that already have been asked.
I'd like to make one general comment. I think it's fantastic. The use of the mix of residences. I would encourage you to follow what's happening across the river at Olivet. There's some proposed legal action against some broker's license for the MSD wafting that's coming across. There's some arguments going on, was that disclosed properly by that developer and his internal broker? So they're already spending money on lawyers, so just pay attention to that as you move forward, because you're basically right next door. But I think it's a fantastic project. I think it'd be great for the town, but people want sidewalks. They vote with their feet.
Any other council member?
Yes, I would like to. So what is the price for a given distance of sidewalk? I mean, do you have any idea how much?
I mean, there's a cost. So I'll get into explaining the reasons why we didn't provide them first, and it wasn't cost.
It was or was not?
It was not cost.
Okay,
It's a dimensional restriction.
Okay.
So, given the two locations that we are required to access this parcel given to us by NCDOT, what we're trying to do is wind our way up to the ridges and ride those ridges. These ridges are very narrow. And although we're not in a steep slope area, there's, the majority of this parcel does have steep slopes. 3-to-1 slopes 33%, 2-to-1 slopes 50%. So what we're trying to do is ride narrow ridges with a road network, and these ridges fall off, and then double load home infrastructure on either one of those. We have a 20-foot road section that we need to abide by, plus a roll valley curb, plus 2 6-foot sidewalks, plus 25 feet to the house, plus the depth of the house. So you can start to imagine that gets exponential, and this grade is falling off. So,
Put sidewalks on one side of the street, not on both. I'm not buying that.
so with that discussion, and given the intent to minimize land disturbance, not only does that disturbance and that impervious add to stormwater infrastructure and the acreage associated with constructing that, it's compounded. I would venture to guess we would add up to 5 more acres of disturbance
You only
by providing that.
You're only disturbing 38 out of 90? I mean, that's tiny.
Sure. That, but that was a goal of this project. So in lieu of doing that, we think we're going to attract, like this region does, outdoor younger families that could utilize the trails to gain access to the future DOT study that we understand is going to occur, thus the generous offering by the developer to say, yeah, I'll dedicate an easement for the purposes of that study and future infrastructure, so my residents, via the trails, can gain access to that. So that was the goal, to minimize that development, infrastructure, disturbance, impervious, stormwater. It just compounds. So that was the initial goal. I would also say that the majority of these roads exceed what would be accessible in terms of ADA compliance. These roads are over 5% in slope. In some areas, they are less than that, but 90% of this road network exceeds an accessibility requirement. So even if we provided sidewalks, they seem accessible, but they would be in excess of 5% that is an ADA compliant.
So your broker package would advise handicapped people not to buy in the neighborhood?
That is not what I'm suggesting.
I hear what you're saying.
Most roads in the city of Asheville exceed a 5%. For us to say that we have accessible pedestrian facilities on this property would not be appropriate, because they won't be accessible when it comes to federal law.
Jason, do you know what the cross-section, that might be helpful for council to know a little bit more about that trail system that you're.
Sure. So we haven't delved into the details of that, but I can imagine a 6 to 8 foot soft surface path, and an 8 to 10 foot along Goodman. There's a logging road that's appropriate to provide that path, which we've agreed to pave that portion running parallel to provide access, not only for this community, but the Goodman residents and Altura in the future, which then leads to the NCDOT future facilities.
I'm just saying, you walk around Woodfin, people all over this town will tell you, damn it, why didn't they make them put in sidewalks? Well, that's one of the #1 complaints residents in this town have.
Sure. I think the challenge here, sir, different from other communities, is the terrain and these narrow
I live in a
ridges.
steep slope area, I understand that. I live on a steep slope mountain street, and we could still use sidewalks, and now we've got mothers with strollers in the middle of the street, and we had a resident, to avoid one, total his car and almost get killed last year. It's something you gotta consider.
And you said the #1 thing people ask for is sidewalks, and I say the #1 thing people ask for is affordable housing.
I would correct myself and say you're exactly right.
Thank you, and that's what we're doing. And there's a lot of factors. We have a 25-foot setback. Where's the car going to park? These don't have garages. The car's going to park in front of the house, more than likely.
You're not going to have garages?
We're not, no. We're building affordable houses. A cottage community, lovely, like a Montford community. We're not, so these are on slopes, and by pushing these houses back, you're now increasing your foundation cost, you're increasing many costs. So, I think our main objective is affordable housing. And that.
So affordable housing can have sidewalks. I'm struggling.
Well, I guess, do you want a handicapped person there's a car parked there. So they're going to be walking along and there's a car, so now they're going to get in the road anyway. It might get ran over by a car.
In driveways?
We're going to be parking these cars in front of the houses.
In driveways?
In driveways.
Okay, not on the street.
So
Okay.
your sidewalk would be in the driveway.
Unless we so what we're trying to do is minimize the depth from the back of curb to the front of the garage, and from our perspective, that's 25 feet.
So are you gonna give us square footage price projections at this point in today's market, so we can do
We're
some
gonna
thought?
start in the threes,
In the,
300,000 range.
oh, not 300 per square foot.
No.
What kind of square foot price on average for your phase one?
Starting at about 1,100 square feet, 1,200 square feet, going up to about 2,000 square feet.
So 300 to 400 a square foot. You seen that?
Maybe,
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I don't care about the sidewalk issue. I don't think that it's appropriate for a site that steep, but I do want to take you up on the invitation to consider the affordable housing aspect of it. There's a mechanism that your site planners are going to be well familiar with, doing work with the city of Asheville, for how you can actually put that commitment in writing in the course of a conditional zoning and give us some level of certainty that that will actually happen. It's not here now. There's no commitment to restrict any units for a certain level of affordability. So if there was something in here that said, we're not just saying it's affordable, we'll restrict 10% of these units to only go to people who make 80% of the area median income, or AMI, then we would know that's an actual value, and it's one that you're going to be held to. Is there any willingness on your part to consider something like that?
we would consider that, yes. We're already planning on that, actually, and we don't want to, you say 10% I think would be doable, but with building costs going up, it's a little scary to commit to anything more than that, but.
Would you be okay with the delay until such time you could commit to it for approval for this? If we back off on the sidewalk, because I don't think I'm alone on sidewalks. May not be
To
four, but I
commit
think it's
to-
more than one.
Well, our goal has always been to build affordable housing, and our goal has also always been to offer it to this 80% of AMI, a percentage of it. So, and our builder can step up here. He's already building affordable housing.
And just to clarify that, it sounds like you're willing to accept a condition where 10% of the units would be affordable to those earning 80% of your income. So if that is something you're willing to accept, we can edit the conditions to add that. And I don't know.
We are willing to accept that, and that's already our plan. So,
I'd go with that.
There may be a need, and I'm looking to staff on this to tell us whether we need additional time, because I understand that these are going to be for sale units, and then in that case, there needs to be some understanding of what the deed language would specifically look like. I think that there are plenty of go-bys with the neighboring municipalities that we could just use something like that, or the one that is typically used by the Asheville-Buncombe Land Trust. But it may be worthwhile to specify that very specifically. So if there's not an enormous urgency to have it approved today, that might allow us to put that condition in writing and then also specify how the deed restriction would look.
well, there is, we'd like to have this approved today.
Okay.
And, we're doing everything in our power to,
But that doesn't mean that we wouldn't agree to that
That's
condition.
right.
But the
That's right.
specifics of that deed language, I think, could be sorted through after
Mm-hmm.
that.
Just need to make sure that whatever we put the condition as, that it's specific enough to give us
let's
that
also
leverage.
consider, the zoning allows up to 7 units an acre. We are just a little over 3 units an acre. We're only utilizing 52% of the land. We are building a product that everyone in the community needs and wants. So to get hung up on sidewalks when the sidewalk really doesn't fit this particular product, I think is
Remember that that's a
not a
matter
path to go
of,
down.
remember that's a matter of opinion, and there's no guarantee that we would approve 7 units per in the first place. So,
Well, that's what your zoning allows, up to, yeah.
but you still have to be here on a project this big.
No, I absolutely do, but I'm saying we are well
We're-
within.
I'm the biggest proponent in town on this dais for affordable housing. $400,000 is affordable for who? We know that's a talking point. I think that's great. I'd be perfectly amenable to a condition like Councilman Edgerton's brought up
Like
to
I
back off on sidewalks for some
already said.
affordable housing.
Perfectly willing to do that.
How do we do that?
That's what we're talking about. right?
Okay, I understand.
We're not the problem.
Yeah. So, look, I'll tell
So
you, I mean,
we're-
from a
be
policy,
careful, please.
policy perspective, I agree with you in terms of, I don't think it's appropriate to have sidewalks in a steep slope area like this. I think that the harm to the loss of canopy is worse than the gain in any limited mobility, given the slopes that you're going to have on those sidewalks. I think that as we're getting at, though, the trade-off is that that's a good policy calculation. It's also a tremendous cost savings. So I think that if you're willing to reduce it to a condition that those cost savings are going to be passed along in some tangible way by virtue of a deed restriction requiring that these properties be sold to 10% of these properties be sold to people making 80% of the area median income. I think that's a good way of reducing that to writing. I'm just going to look and impose on our town attorney for what level of specificity he thinks we need to put in there.
That was my question.
Okay.
That was my question.
She's doing a good job, as far as I can tell upside down.
Townsend implied that she's a problem, so let's get it
And
done.
we're in favor of this. I mean, you don't have to hold our feet to the fire.
Good.
We agree. We
Good.
think it's what the community needs and,
I want to know how soon you can have units for sale. That's my question.
Well, as soon as you give us the approval, we're going
You'll have them on the market tomorrow. I hear you.
Well, I mean, that is a.
What a sales
to
lady.
be our first customer, yeah.
And I do think, I mean, I'll ask that seriously, and I think it's probably one for your builder. I mean, how long do you think, I mean, I get that there's a good amount of permitting left, but realistically, how soon are you looking at for breaking ground?
Yeah, definitely by the spring of next year, we're looking to break ground on actual construction. Like they said, we'll go in phases. So the area in the center and the pink would represent phase one. We try and get up to that crossroad and get as much of that input as we could prior to. And I just want to hit on the affordable housing and the sidewalks, because I'm also affordable home builder. I have a community in Morris Hill. Went through this same kind of process with Asheville and Buncombe, and speak to a lot of different municipalities. This is a huge problem that we have in all of these communities, affordable housing. And I ask you, to consider, our government sets the price of affordable housing. That number right now, guys, is $377,000. And it's not our job as builders and developers to make the house cheaper. There's a lot of education programs and a lot of different ways that nonprofit entities can help individuals that make 80% of the AMI. And that's the toughest thing, because right now the income limits, they don't really match up with what's there for what's affordable. I'm a builder. 377 is not affordable.
We
I
agree.
can't have my 24-year-old, buy that house and she's college educated. So the trade-off then starts to become, and, we spoke about this, I think, several months ago. There is different entities, different nonprofits, different organizations, and we want to try and utilize all the incentives we can as developers to get as much help as we can. And let's say, for instance, Asheville Regional Consortium, HUD, USDA, if we're delivering in that type of number of houses, then we're going to get some extra help over here from some different folks that don't help for-profit builders. We're actually going to be able to, potentially borrow money cheaper. We may be able to look at doing some sidewalks. And just, Vice Mayor, to go back to the sidewalks, I don't have sidewalks in the development that we're doing now. It's only 100 units. I was really excited to build that. I was, at that time when I started that development, I was the high school football coach in Madison. So I wanted more kids on the team. We don't have affordable housing, so my plan was, we want to build these as inexpensively as we can. We're going to take money on the chin, help as many people as we can. And what we found, in doing so, that price continues to rise. And even when I speak to, USDA, they say, we set the price, Brandon, not you. And even in that area, I still have houses for $330,000. They're not flying off the shelves, and however, it's the cheapest thing in the market in a 100-mile radius from here right now. And the other part of that is, 7% interest rate. So we went through the pandemic. We went through the highest material price increases that we've ever seen in this area before, and now we're battling the Fed rate. So there's a lot of things working against us also. And I think that's where USDA and some of these entities want to step in. They want to help. I mean, you see people picking around Asheville with signs say, we need affordable housing now, not later, now. So, I've spoke to a lot of different municipalities, the city of Asheville, to try and come up with a problem or come up with a solution to this problem. And these entities are not going to help for-profit developers, which means, we have an opportunity to look and potentially do some different things and work with some nonprofits, mountain housing opportunities. What they're running out of is space, guys, in this whole area. So everything that you see being built now is typically being built vertically. Like my next affordable home project is off Sweden Creek. It's 64 units on 2 acres. So I can get the numbers right to sell them for $250 a whack, and have, people can afford to
We look
get
forward
them.
to you coming back with some of that in Woodfin, to be honest with you.
Well, and that's the thing. I think we have a real opportunity.
We'll work with you.
To do something really special here. And I've like I said, I've been all over your guys' group here. Like, I've listened to a lot of different municipalities and townships, and they can't get on the same page. You guys are definitely on the same page, and it was every agenda item tonight. It's impressive. So
Except maybe one, but.
I appreciate it, because most people bump heads over this one simple thing that we're trying to do. It's like a plastic bag. It makes sense. And this makes sense. And part of the things that we tried to do in it is we bumped the numbers up. Maybe every single one of those units can't be built, but we want to try and max the numbers out and try and put as many in as we can. And obviously, the market's going to dictate to us. And just so everyone knows, the average cost in Buncombe County, Asheville specifically, is $531,000. It's a $397 a square foot average. Okay, so if we put in a 1,200 square foot house and we can deliver in the 300s, and people have the opportunities to utilize different entities to give them $25,000 in down payment assistance. Maybe we look at some grant money and borrow it through the town of Woodfin to help with sidewalks at lower interest rate. We have a lot of different things, like you want to work with us and we want to work with you. And we want to put it in, we want it to be right. The road system, it's going to be delivered just like any other road system that you're driving on right now. Like, we have specifications and standards set by the engineers that we have to abide by. So every time we build a road, engineers are inspecting it, so it could potentially be turned over. It's all engineered, it's right. We are able to give you the documentation that it's built to DOT specs and standards, because we want to do it right. And, there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of different places around here that people didn't do it right. And it costs more, and unfortunately, their HOAs are not going to fix the problem, unless you raise the rate. And then you become the Karen on the side cutting people's mailboxes down. So.
All right, I think you gave Shannon enough time to write the new condition out, so.
Let me read this to you. The developer agrees to deed restrict a minimum of 10% of the total number of units to be permanently affordable to those households earning 80% or less of period median income.
And then just, we'll just need to say, subject to approval of what that language, what the deed restricted language is going to finally look like at the end, but assuming that that can be worked out, then.
Sir?
Mutually agreeable.
To mutually agreeable deed restriction language, yep.
And just for you all, for your benefit too, the town has been working or trying to work with Asheville Community Land Trust, which is a nonprofit in this area who can help with monitoring and managing those affordable units. So if these are for sale units, at some point they'll be out of the picture, but they will take over and they can handle that part of the project.
And I'll guarantee you that in the next 2 years, those things are only going to exponentially increase. We're going to see money coming from many different kinds of entities. We just haven't gone and searched for it before.
Absolutely. And, we sat through and we looked at the storm. And I'm a builder. I love these buildings. Think about that. So what this does to the community is puts other people on board. It gives, some other people so we can start to get corrected at a much quicker rate. I know what it's done for the town of Morrisville and the county of Madison. I was hoping people like that today us to come there because this is such an issue in every single place.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Ricky?
Or the development team?
Oh, yeah. I get down here. Yeah, we got the recommendation. Okay, we ready for the hearing? Okay, I'll open the public hearing about rezoning this property.
Anybody signed up?
Okay, I'm going to open the hearing at 7:16 PM. Does anyone wish to speak regarding this proposal? Or this ordinance? Anyone wish to speak? Last time, does anyone wish to speak? Okay, hearing none, I'll close this public hearing at 7:17 PM. And regarding to ordinance 2023-020, do we have a motion from the board?
Do we have a proposed one in here that I'm not seeing?
Just so you
Oh, okay. Got it, okay. But before I read, I did just want to make sure that, because that went by kind of fast, and that's the first time we did that. The area of median income it's a term of art that a lot of other municipalities rely on all the time, but it's the first time we have, because we're new to conditional zoning. But what that is you take the income of people that live in this area and you find the dead middle point. You don't take the mean, you don't let it get skewed by extremely high income earners. You go to the middle, and then people who make 80% of whatever that number is are they're going to be the only ones eligible to purchase those 10% that have been set aside now. So it's a small step in the right direction, but it's a step in the right direction, which is why that addresses all the concerns that I had with the project. So I'm in favor of it, but.
You'll make the motion.
I'll do the motion. I move to approve the conditional zoning of 89.7 acres as shown on Exhibits A and B from Mountain Village to Mountain Village Conditional Zone, subject to the conditions identified in the Exhibit D project conditions and subject to the following additional conditions as read by our town manager.
The developer agrees to deed restrict a minimum of 10% of the total number of units to be permanently affordable to those households earning 80% or less of area median income, subject to mutually agreeable deed restrictions.
And find that the request is reasonable, is in the public interest, is consistent with the Town of Woodfin comprehensive plan, and meets the development needs of the community, in that the request, 1, encourages walking and promotes connectivity within the development through an internal network of trails and a linked system of open spaces. 2, promotes economic development by providing compatible infill development of undeveloped properties within the town that reduces infrastructure cost while allowing open space to be preserved. 3, preserves Woodfin's environment and character by preservation of a significant portion of the parcel as open space. 4, encourages low-impact cluster development that preserves environmentally sensitive areas such as ridge tops, steep terrain, and areas adjacent to streams and creeks.
And 5,
And 5 promotes the comprehensive plan's identified goal of increasing affordable housing.
Okay, you've heard the motion. Do we have a second?
Second it.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Better.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
I was looking at them, they were used.
Okay, do we have anything else to come before the board tonight?
Mr. PA, thank you for coming. Man, are you associated with that project?
Oh, no, sir.
You just came.
I live on Google.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Absolutely.
Somebody come to every meeting.
I appreciate you guys.
Okay, hearing nothing else,
I'm a knucklehead.
hearing nothing else, do we have a motion to close this session, to go into closed session?
I'm so moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, we'll take a